The $150 billion question. We hear people on the right say that Obama gave Iran pallets of cash. And we hear people on the left saying that that's an outright lie because the cash was money that was already Iran's, that was just frozen in foreign accounts. So which one of these things is true? Well, in the real world, unlike the world that we hear about on TV news, and unlike the world we learn about via internet memes, there is one fact, and that is two things can be true at once. In order to get a full, accurate picture of the $150 billion question, we need to go back and we need to look at contemporaneous accounts and reporting of what was really going on at the time. Now, there's a few challenges with doing this. The first challenge is the Iran deal was very controversial then, almost as controversial as it still is now. So there are politically tinged reports on both sides. So that's a thing we have to deal with. But just note, it was a controversial deal, and not just because of the money. It was controversial for a lot of other reasons too. Like, for instance, just in terms of foreign policy philosophy in general, like there's two different main schools of thinking when it comes to dealing with America's foes around the world. One of them was what Obama did with Iran, which is appeasement. That is offering some type of deal with the promise of the behaviors we want attached to it. And hindsight's 2020, it didn't work at all. Actually, all the detractors of the Iran deal and the people that were critical of it at the time were proven right. But I did talk about that in my last recording, my last hot take. You could go back and listen to that. The other philosophy, of course, is the philosophy Trump is implementing now, which is deterrence, which is doing something that makes a statement and says, we won't allow you to do X, Y, and Z in this part of the world. So philosophically, there's two different main schools of thinking, and one's not right and one's not wrong, and you wouldn't even use the same one across the board. Even right now, Trump is using a very different philosophy with Iran than he's using for, let's say, China. And that's appropriate because you run your life that way too. Everything's a different case and you pick how to handle it case by case. But like I said, hindsight's 2020. Obama's philosophy on Iran did not work. It's been proven wrong by history. So all the people that are still trying to sort of prop it up on a pedestal today kind of have egg on their face, and it's a little weird to defend it because, again, it was wrong. But that doesn't mean it was wrong at the time, and that doesn't mean Obama and Hillary set out to do something wrong. It just means it didn't work. So anyway, the deal was controversial for reasons other than the financial angle. And number two is a really big problem that we face, and that is media outlets are constantly whitewashing things they covered in the past that don't conveniently fit their current political narrative. Probably CNN and MSNBC are the two biggest offenders of this. And that is, CNN might have reported a very clean, factual story about where the money came from and what all the numbers meant. They may have reported that in 2015, but because that story conflicts with CNN's current political leanings, they go back and delete that. Actually, the Internet Wayback Machine is a really fun tool for this because you can actually watch media outlets cover up their own tracks and just make it seem like things didn't happen just by deleting stories. But this is a thing constantly engaged in by leftists, and that is whitewashing history or gaslighting, just trying to say something has the opposite meaning or say it didn't happen entirely. And this is a tool and tactic that they employ, and you see it happening all the time on CNN and MSNBC. So that's a real challenge as well. But again, tools that help us, Internet Wayback Machine. And since I have a background, as a lot of my friends know, in debate leagues and debate competitions, I was a professional debater in high school and in college when I went to Penn State. There are tools we use, LexisNexis is one of them, to read these these accounts and reports and studies, and certainly read transcripts of hearings and public testimony, anything that was available, that was public documents, essentially. There are tools we can go back and reuse to find them and read the contemporaneous reports. So that's what we have to do to get a clear picture. So, clearest picture I could provide, these are a couple facts. The first one is there was money frozen in foreign accounts. All right, so there was a lot of money that was in accounts with Iran's name on them all over the world. Okay, that part's true. The second thing that's also true, though, is the totals don't really add up, in that the contemporaneous evidence where basically banks around the world said these are Iranian-owned accounts and these are totals, they don't add up to the totals that we paid Iran. So that's true also. So there's a big questionable tracking the total and where the totals came from that we don't know. The third thing is, outside of this total, there was payments made to contractors and other things that really kind of make the story even more unclear. For instance, as part of the deal, which only covered nuclear, right? Again, like I said in my last recording, the deal didn't magically make Iran better people. In fact, they were still radical Islamic terrorists literally the whole time the deal was in force. All they couldn't do is they couldn't proliferate or develop nuclear weapons. But there were inspections and everything. Well, of course, Iran negotiated what parties would do the inspections and how much it would cost. So they'd be dumb not to. And to think that this type of negotiation doesn't happen all over the world is really naive, because it does. And it is a very real way that countries essentially get money from the US. And some call it an extortion fee or a bribery fee, but this is a very real thing that's built into a lot of deals, and it was built into the Iran deal. So when Trump says things like 150 billion, not to mention 1.8 billion, when he says that, everyone's kind of looking at the 150 and kind of glossing over the rest of the sentence. But this is what he's referring to. And what he's referring to is other payments were made other than the one that was promised to get Iran into the deal. So when John Kerry goes on TV and says like what Trump said is an outright lie and it didn't cost American taxpayers a penny, the first half of what John Kerry said, he might feel that way, but the second half of what he said, it didn't cost taxpayers anything, that part is absolutely a lie. So there, even John Kerry crossed the line from saying something based on his convictions into something he knew wasn't true, because he was Secretary of State at the end, and he knew what the payments were going after the pallets of cash got delivered, right? So that is absolutely a lie, because other payments were made because somebody had to pay for inspections, and that was negotiated ahead of time, and the person paying was us. Obviously, they weren't going to just, and that's the other part of these deals, where the U.S. foots and fronts the whole bill, and the other groups that are a party to the deal just really don't pay anything or carry their weight, which is something Trump has said a lot and a lot of Americans agree with, but that's a topic for a different time. So the other thing that's true is America did front the cash. Okay, so keep in mind, it's money frozen in foreign accounts. That's the line that the left uses. And let's say it's frozen in 25 accounts. It's a little hard to say the exact number, but it's quite a few. The U.S. took the total and just paid that. Now, maybe the banks in the other countries that held the frozen funds, maybe they sent Obama a check the next week and said, hey, thanks, pal. But maybe they didn't. Tracking that is virtually impossible. The final thing here to note is what I said was it was money in accounts owned by Iran. I didn't say it was their money. Okay? This is a really important line of distinction, because at the time the deal was penned, and indeed after the deal, almost the whole time, Iran is a country which is a de facto military dictatorship. The supreme leader of Iran has been in office since 1989, right? So it is a de facto military dictatorship, but Iran's a country who the whole time of my whole life's history has been involved in bribes and stealing and theft and extortion and kidnapping and hijacking ships and pirating and looting ships. So tracking the chain of custody on this alleged Iranian money that was seized by other countries, tracking the chain of custody on that money is very questionable at best. Even while the Iran deal was in effect, Iran detained 6 US soldiers, and those soldiers didn't get released for nothing. They didn't just let them out the door the next day and say, hey, we'll wait till next time. Iran was systematically engaged in hostage taking and extorting their neighbors and the US and receiving money for doing all of this. And when their docket wasn't filled with kidnapping and extortion, they were busy hijacking ships and pirating ships all over the world, notably in the Strait of Hormuz. So they received sort of ransom payments from the US, from United Arab Emirates, from Saudi Arabia, and countless other countries. It's kind of like when you see CSI negotiate with a kidnapper, yeah, they might transfer the funds, but then they freeze the account immediately, right? Because that's not justifiably earned money. It's kind of like the same thing as though you caught a drug dealer on the street and the cops seized $100,000 in cash hidden in their vehicle, and then that drug dealer gets out of jail and says, I want my $100,000 back. Now, in the US, virtually no American would say, hey, give him his money back. But when we extend that same example into foreign policy and make it about the US relations with another country, half of the Americans say, yeah, you shouldn't give him his money back. And the other half say, well, why don't you just give it back? It's a really weird thing. And all of these reasons, as I said, 2 things can be true at once. All of these reasons why you never see or have seen Obama or Hillary try to justify or explain the money part of the deal. Keep in mind, Hillary was Secretary of State at the time, not John Kerry. But the reason why you never see either one of them try to explain away the money or its sourcing or these various payments is because it just makes the whole deal look worse, not better. So they would never be able to explain this away in a way that makes the deal seem savory and squeaky clean, because the deal was never savory and squeaky clean. Under international law, under most international laws, it's basically illegal to have a sort of quid pro quo of a payment for a certain behavior. It doesn't look good, it doesn't feel right, and it's probably immoral, but in most cases, that direct activity would be illegal under international law. However, most deals do this, but word it and structure it in such a way to make that not seem unsavory. And the way to do it in the Iran deal was simply tally up all this money that people said was frozen Iranian assets and just hand it back. The deal itself, on its surface, was a payment to get a certain behavior, because no banks holding that money all over the world felt it was Iran's just money that they were holding back from them. That's what led them to freeze the accounts in the first place. If you earn money in the commission of a crime, is that money yours? So it's kind of this same revolving line of questions about almost every dollar in question here. Again, it's really a multi-layered onion, and that's why I said at the beginning, 2 things can be true at once. It's just hard to take the type of time to explain that on TV, and internet memes certainly don't explain it, because, we live in a world where people are looking for some quick soundbite that will confirm their own feelings or bias. So I'll leave you with this. With all the information that I laid out for you, explaining the full picture of the deal, which side is telling a story that is closer to the truth? I'll leave that for you to decide. Thanks for listening.